Welcome back to the program. Glad you're with us. Okay, so we're finally back in business this morning. Never, ever a dull moment when it comes to making technology work, especially when electricity seems to want to have problems. But I can't blame GEBE this time around. We had a circuit breaker trip, and that's what caused the drama this morning. Say good morning to my very good friend Emil Lee, the host of St. Martin Insights News that matters to you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sock. Good morning, listeners. Nice to be here again.
Yeah, it's always good. I look forward to Thursdays because I get to have intellectual conversation, which is always nice. And please join us in welcoming Member of Parliament, the Honourable Ardwell Arian. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, listeners. Good morning to the people of St. Martin. I'm happy to be here again.
We're thrilled that you came in this morning. I was really worried this morning with the shutter and not going up. And am I going to be able to get in, or are we going to have to cancel this? Otherwise, I'm going to bring everybody to the house, and we would have done it from the studio in the corner of my bedroom.
That works. Whatever works.
Yeah, whatever. The bed wasn't even made, but the golden retriever Nevea would have been there. So all is good. All is good. So, Emil, where are we starting? There's so much that I want to talk to the MP about, but where are we starting?
So indeed, we wanted to talk to the MP about his new legislation that he's going to propose in Parliament. Or I guess
No,
it's already
actually,
been proposed
it's
already.
been submitted.
It's been submitted. But before we do that, just real quickly, yesterday we had the Council of Ministers press briefing, and apparently the 2025 budget is scheduled to go into Central Committee next week, and then the week after begin the parliamentary debates. And I've asked in particular about marketing activities that are not active because they haven't been funded. And I asked, is this a consequence of the 2025 budget not being approved? And I get a little bit of a song and dance about it. And so I thought I'd just real quickly touch on what do you expect the atmosphere, the tone to be like regarding the budget debates? Is this just going to be a quick administrative thing and just go through quickly, or do you think there's going to be a lot of discussion about it? And as a former minister of finance, how do you find that the impact of the budget not being approved is affecting St. Martin today?
Okay, that's some good questions. In terms of the budget next week, the tone, so I can't speak for all MPs, but I'll say this. It would be irresponsible of MPs not to look for some type of accountability regarding the budget process, and why we're here today.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so actually, I was on your show months ago, when I brought up the topic of the novelle and what they were trying to do. And I believe a month later, MP Westcott was here.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the opportunity. Matter of fact, all of us said, hey, just bring back the budget. Let's get it over with.
Right. Do it as quick as possible.
So
Bite
now
the bullet. Right.
You're 4 months late. 4 months late. You look for all type of other ways not to do it the right way, to be 4 months late unnecessarily.
So listen. When do we expect the budget to be approved and finished?
I'm not sure.
And listen, I mean, we've got 25 more days before the year is half over. So this is, quite frankly, an embarrassment to the world that we can't get our budget, we can't get our financial plan in order before the year starts.
In the budget, it's public. So in the budget, the Council of Advice, the Raad van Advies, the entity that you submit the budget to for checks, on May 9th, in their advice to the government, it states, hey guys, you submitted the budget without putting in all the amendments that you said were a concern on May 9th. The reason why the budget was late, you still submitted the budget to the Council of Advice without the necessary changes. So what were you doing for 3 months or 4 months?
Here's what I struggle with, and you were Minister of Finance, so here's what I know for my own business, right? I will get till usually about August, and I'll forecast out what I think the rest of the year will look like, based on how things are going and what do I think is going to happen between August and December. And I'll say, this is what I think my budget for year end for the rest of the year looks like. And based on how I think I'm going to end the current year, I then start to build out the budget for the next year based on projects that I want to
Mm-hmm.
do, things I want to do, what I think revenue is going to look like. Am I going to give people raises? Am I going to do all that kind of stuff? And, you know, it takes me with a small business like this, it takes me, I don't know, a day or two to kind of work through it. And what I keep struggling, and this was the approach that I learned when I was, 22 years old and started in banking. That's what we did. And so I keep scratching my head and going, okay, well, why can't we do that
So
with
I
with our
think
small town?
no. So I think this time around it was not, let's say, the organization. I think this was mainly politics, right? Because they submitted the exact same budget
Hmm.
supposedly
Hmm.
from January.
Hmm.
So the delays that we have now are only because of political decisions.
Well, that's sad. That's just plain sad.
So there are things that need to get funded that are not being funded right
Yes.
now because it's not approved. Do
Yes.
you have any examples? I mean, I know for sure marketing activities that should be going on
For
are not being
example,
executed.
and it's the start of the hurricane season,
Hmm.
and from what I've understood, the government has not paid their insurance premium for this year.
Well, that's sad.
We're
That's
we're,
scary.
we're so we're setting a very bad example for the population as a government, right? And you know what's crazy? So typically we think hurricanes are gonna come in September, August, but we've seen, I believe it was a couple of years ago or last year, one that came like early June, or was it July?
Listen, it is very possible, that you could see even pre June, tropical activity. That it is possible. We have seen storms develop in May.
Mm,
The likelihood of those types of storms developing in May, June, and July being the long tracking, long period tracking hurricanes that come all the way across the Atlantic from Africa and then nail us because they've got that whole time to build and brew. The likelihood of seeing those early in the season is less likely than later in the season, which is why the peak is always the
yeah,
peak. But at the end of the day, you got to be prepared,
yeah.
right? Now is the time. And one of the, put your kit together, look at last year's kit, see what's expired, see what you need to replace, talk about your plan, make sure the shutters work, make sure the generators work. If you have a generator, do all your servicing, all your testing,
Pay your
inspect your roof.
insurance.
Yes, thank you. It's funny, my insurance broker, Mark Grunwald who's in Rotary with me from Atlas, called me last week and said, "I'll have the renewals for you. But I renew in early July every year." I said, "I'll have your renewals, as soon as they come in. As soon as I get them, I'll send them." I'm like, "No problem. I'll send you a check, or I'll send you a transfer. No checks." Um,
And I heard press briefing yesterday when Emil asked about the Expedia payments and so forth. Um, so I'm not sure if it's because of the budget, if because the advices were late. But at the end of the day, you gave priority to Soul Beach, for example, without following a legal basis when you had a proven model that extends our slow season that went unanswered. And I think that is also sad.
And being a former minister, one of the big tasks of being a minister is when something's important, figure out how to get it done.
And
There
give it
is
and give it
almost
priority.
always a way to get it done. Sometimes you need to sort of walk it through the
Hmm.
different departments, but there's almost always a way to get it done. And so I think it's really sad that basic marketing functions aren't happening. Um, and indeed, the blame seems to be about the 2025 budget not being approved. I'm also hearing that it's because the governor won't sign off on LBAs. But whatever the reason, um, in the end, it's the country who pays for not having marketing in place. And when you don't have your main economy being properly stimulated, that translates into lost income for government, lost income for businesses. It hurts employers,
Hmm.
employees. It hurts everybody. So I find it really sad. So I believe my guess is that the discussion in Parliament next week and the week after is going to be rough. And also now you have a governing program in place, so you can match budget against the governing program. So it'll be interesting to see.
Sak, you mentioned, and so this is also my opinion. I said it in the floor of Parliament already. I said it to the Minister of Finance. She did reply. I said, guys, bring the budget as soon as possible, because every month that you wait longer, things change because now you're bringing a budget in June. In June, as a member of parliament, you want me to approve a budget retroactively, right?
Half the year's gone.
Because I said you have to update the budget with actual figures because it's not projections anymore. You actually know the numbers and then you project going forward.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you?
No, we have the fact of the matter is the we're half the year is gone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, listen, the budget is a financial plan
Exactly.
for the year. So we'll take your actuals from January through
May.
May 31st. That's your budget, and build out the rest of the year, and there you
Thank
go.
you.
And then we're done. Let's stop farting around, because you know what? It's people's lives. It's people's livelihoods that we're playing with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that gets me so frustrated, gentlemen. Let me do this. It's 8:30 on the dot. Let me take a quick break, and then we'll come right back. More St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you, with Emil Lee, and of course our guest this morning, Member of Parliament, the Honorable Ardwell Arian. I'm trying to make him brush when I call him honorable, but it hasn't happened yet.
Um,
Welcome back to the program. Of course, St. Martin Insights News that matters to you with Emil Lee. Welcome back. And of course, our guest this morning, Member of Parliament, the Honorable Ardwell Arian. Thank you for coming in, MP. Let's talk. Legislation.
Yes. You've submitted to Parliament just this week a proposal for revision to the profit tax legislation. Can you explain to us what's the reason for it? What do you hope to achieve by doing this?
Yeah, so this is my first initiative law. I've already had a law amendment to the digital banking law. So this is my first initiative law that I've submitted to Parliament. It's at the Secretariat of Parliament. They're going to review for about 3 to 4 weeks and then give feedback. And then from there, it goes to the Council of Advice. And then they do their whole review. That's going to be about another 3 to 4 weeks. They check it against the Constitution. They check to see if it fits within our laws and etc. And then I'm hoping to take whatever feedback they give, include or explain why. And then I'm hoping that with political will of the Parliament and this coalition, that we get it on the agenda as soon as possible, so that we could have it implemented in January. Otherwise, you'll miss a whole year.
Got it.
So does Parliament need to vote on this before it goes to the Council of Advice?
No. So Council of Advice first comes back. I get opportunity to give my feedback to the Council of Advice, or just implement the changes or recommendations. And then it goes to a central committee of Parliament. And from central committee, it goes to the parliamentary debates, the public meeting.
So normally a law that has big socio-economic impacts goes to the SARE.
So yes, and that comes from, let's say, the position of a minister. So the flow of minister and MPs are a little different. But I could also submit to the SARE.
Because the SARE has
What is
represented...
what's the SARE?
The Social Economic Council, and they look at the social impact of a law. Yes.
And they have representatives from business, they have representatives from the labor union, and I guess representatives from government.
Yes.
So if it's a minister that submits it, it has to go to the SARE.
Depending on the impact of the law. So I could also choose to submit to the SARE also. So once
it seems like it would be prudent.
Yeah. So I've considered that. So I've considered that. I've even considered sending it to the Ombudsman. Right? So once I get it back from the Secretary General, I have to send to Council of Advice, but I've also considered sending it to the Ombudsman and sending it to the SARE at the same time, and hopefully they give their feedback within the same timeline as the.
Well, you're building a coalition. You're building a coalition of advice to drive something forward. So it's not a bad idea. That might take a little longer.
Well, you could do it parallel to while it's at Council of Advice, you can submit it to the SARE.
That's my idea.
That's what I would do.
So let's talk about what the initiative law that you've submitted
What's
contains.
the difference?
What's it contain?
So currently, profit tax is at 34.5%, which is when we did our research, it's probably one of the highest in the region. Aruba's at 25% now. They decreased their own, I believe, in 2023. Curacao is now at 22%. Curacao, I believe, decreased their own in 2016 to 27%, and then in 2023, I also believe they decreased to 22%. But in addition to that, I believe on the first 500,000 guilders, the first 500,000 guilders is 15%, and everything above that, then you get added 22%.
So the first 500,000 guilders, you said, are 15%. That's okay. So similar to a wage tax type of approach, where it's a sliding scale.
Yes. So. And I believe that looking at our legislation, we need to have more hybrid models. We have a very dated legislation. And my philosophy when it comes to policy and legislation, it has to be fit for purpose, right? It has to be fit for St. Martin, our culture, our economy, our size, our people. And we have to make decisions with speed, right? Speed matters, right? So not just...
We struggle with that.
Yes, speed matters. And we can't always wait to have this big package of legislation that's going to take 10 years, because by the time that legislation is ready, available, and ready to be voted on, times already have changed again. Businesses have been complaining for a very, very long time under high profit tax. And what we see is that businesses then create all type of vehicles, right, that push their money out, right? So they're going to create all legal vehicles that put the money outside the country. The other idea of this, bringing it down to 20% and 15%.
So your proposal is to reduce the 34.5% to how much?
To 20% for large. Okay, let's do it this way. 15% for MSMEs, and that's based on the government's policy of what a MSME is. So micro,
So,
small, medium business.
and what is the breaking point, the revenue point?
600,000 guilders.
600,000
Yes, so
guilders.
that's a 2021 policy, and that is also used for the NRPB and World Bank to identify what an MSME is.
So you mean gross revenue
Yeah.
of 600,000
Yes,
guilders?
yes.
Okay, yeah. And
Um,
anything
above
over that
that,
becomes a large
yes,
business.
and
Okay.
that's 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it at the 15%, that's a close to 57% reduction of profit tax, which is significant,
Right.
I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at other countries, let's say the Netherlands, Barbados, Jamaica, whatever, all these countries have like initiatives or subsidies for micro, small, medium businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're probably the very like we're in a minority of countries, islands that don't support or give some type of relief to this sector of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have businesses that pay. If you reduce it to 20%, the hope is also now that hey, instead of paying all these management fees for all these different vehicles to put my money somewhere else because I don't want to pay this profit tax, more money now will stay home for investments. Right, and I think the next step. So the next step that I've been discussing with my team is that we should now encourage businesses to bring the money back home. So we've been discussing and looking at legislation that says, hey, we're going to give a grace period, all right, for you to bring your money back home without being taxed, because we want the millions that are out there to come back home and be used locally for investment.
But part of the problem with that, MP, right, is when you think about it, one's access. If you're born, raised, educated here, have never maybe you've never lived for any length of time off the island, right? And you happen to be a successful business person, you have zero access to capital markets here around the world, whether it's Europe, the United States, or elsewhere. And that's a problem. And if I want to make worldwide investments for the long term, I don't have the ability to do that here.
So that's different. I'm talking about persons, businesses that only created these vehicles because of the profit tax,
Okay.
because they want to be able to save more of their money. Because I've also spoke to businesses that say, hey, I would love to have more money because home, but the profit tax is just way too high.
I mean, the other thing that kind of comes to mind here, and
I also want to say, so because I know that's another point. To get to this point without increasing or bringing a new tax, we had to reduce a number. So we had to cap, reduce, or remove a number of deductibles. All right.
okay, what deductibles have we eliminated?
So I'll get there. But we've also created 2 new deductibles. And why? Because what we looked, again, we believe in a fit for purpose model. The complaints on the island, the complaints that we have on the island are unemployment, persons that too little salary increases, trainings, etc. Like we need more trainings in hospitality. We need more trainings in different sectors. We've had the construction company recently came in. They said we don't have enough persons to do construction, so we've created deductibles that incentivizes businesses to invest in these areas. So we've created a wage deductible. So basically, if you have a payroll and it's basically called a super deductible of 150%. So if you have a payroll of 400,000 guilders in 2024, and in 2025 it's 440,000 guilders, you get to deduct the 40,000 times 150%. So you get to deduct 60,000 guilders. Similar for trainings and accredited certifications and development. You get to deduct 150% of those investments. So now we're incentivizing companies to invest in hiring, invest in salaries, but also invest in your staff when it comes to training, etc.
So here's what I struggle with as a business owner, and you could all slap me for this if you want to. I by the way, I've tried to hire local people, folks from here,
Mm-hmm.
to be on our team and sell radio airtime for years. I've tried to hire people from here to be on air people, and the experience has been very,
Lackluster.
very. That's a nice way to
I know.
put it.
I tried to save you.
Yeah. Thank you, MP. And then when I go and find someone who maybe wants to work, the reason they want to apply is they're not yet legal on the island, and they want to and they want to use me as a way to make them legal,
Mm-hmm.
and that just feels wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Number two, um, when I look to hire someone, I want to hire someone who I can show how to do a job, but not have to teach them the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do their job. And 99% of the time, anybody who's shown up on my doorstep is either A, looking for me to make them legal, or B, doesn't have the basic educational background of being able to for me to send you to talk to one of my customers and not be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, it's not my job to be training and educate. It's not even training. I'll train you to do a job. It's not my job to give you basic education.
No, I agree with that. But if you owned a hotel, for example, and you're training your staff, you want to train your staff. Actually, I've seen it with Maho. I've seen it with Motor World. I've seen a lot of companies that do invest in training. It now incentivizes you to do that even more. So it doesn't. So for example, in your case, it doesn't take away from that. It doesn't take away, because what it says is, if you do this,
Mhm.
right, you get a benefit.
So let me ask you. What I always understood is, in terms of profit tax, the bulk of it is actually paid by the insurance companies and the banks.
No, there's other. I'm not gonna name all these companies personally, but there's other companies also.
Okay,
But
what
obviously-
industries?
but the largest were insurance companies and bank or industry.
Vehicle industries.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Okay, so
Hotels. I would say something.
So, and other companies have put structures into place to avoid the profit tax.
Yes.
And many times if they've already put the money into that structure to avoid profit tax, I'm not so sure that they'll change it
So
to bring the money back.
So it depends. So that's a discussion we've had with a few businesses, and they said yes, if it's at 30%, not at 20%, more than likely, because then it's and
But-
if there's a way to bring it back in without having to
Pay.
yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of overall revenue for the government, off air you mentioned that currently the profit tax brings in somewhere between 45 and 55 million guilders. What do you expect will happen to government's revenue in terms of profit tax now? Do you expect it to go up or down, or what do you expect?
So I'll say this I believe before we add a new tax, we have to bring a benefit, right? So we can't burden the population with more taxes or bring that benefit. So first, let's lower the profit tax. Let's encourage businesses to do the right thing, right?
Mhm.
Let's get the informal economy more formal. So one, I expect profit tax to remain relatively the same, because we also now have less deductibles. But I also believe it will encourage businesses to do better. But I also believe the government now has to do their job and enforcing their control. That's one. Secondly, I have I said it once on one other interview, but I have a second piece of legislation that's coming, hopefully in the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
We should round it up. That will also be revenue generating,
Mm.
right? So that'll also help offset, if any. But this is because of all the deductibles, it should be close to neutral. That's what I expect. I expect the profit tax to be close to neutral minus all the deductibles. So that's why we removed or capped so many deductibles.
So what deductibles have gone away? Can I?
Let me get some. So
just
So
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
When you say deductible to me, I think of here's my profit, here's my gross
Mhm.
revenue, my gross operating profit, and then I've got a list of
Expenses.
expenses.
Yes.
I'm eliminating things that could be on that expense list.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's say of course salaries are expense, right?
Mhm.
So there are a list of deductibles that we already have in the law that you could remove. Some of them are a lot more complex for the tax inspectorate, right? And some of them are prone to abuse.
Mhm.
So what we've done is looked at all these deductibles. We have, for example, representation and entertainment. I'll say in English, representation and entertainment expenses. Those were capped at 1%.
1%
Yeah.
of your gross
Yeah.
revenue.
So like dinners, receptions, gifts, and all those are now capped. Vehicle expenses has been capped to a certain amount. But we've removed the home office deduction. So if you had a home office, if you invested in, let's say, tables and chairs and so forth, that could have been deducted. And I know some small businesses, well, yeah, but I invest in my home office, but
But that might be my only office.
yes. But I'll say this: what you then get is a one-time deductible because you're not going to invest in that same furniture every year, right? So if you think long term, you gain as a small business, you're going to almost the lowest in terms of profit tax that you'll get anywhere in the region. We're the most competitive in the region when it comes to profit tax for small business now at 15%.
But home office deduction can also include rent, right? So if you rent your home and you say I allocate a portion of my home
Yes.
to a home office,
Yes.
then a portion of their rent is currently
Yes.
deductible. So
But,
I mean,
but even with that, don't forget we've reduced the profit tax down to 57%. Even with a rent deductible, you're not going to reach the 57%. So now we've made it easy for all. We've simplified the system for all small businesses because you're not going to reach 57% with deductibles. And
what's the 57%?
the reduction from 34.5% to 15% is a 57%
Okay.
deduction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So if you look at it that way, if you say as a small business, you say, okay, if I look at my rent and I could take a portion off there, I could take off this, you're not going to reach the 57%. You're not.
I see.
So the benefit is long term. The benefit isn't to take.
So
on
what
a
you're
micro
saying
level.
is based on your current tax rate,
Yeah.
even when you apply the deductions,
For-
you're not going to get to a 15% profit tax rate.
Yes.
So
and of course, every small business is different. But I'm looking at, if you look at your rent, for example, your example, you're not going to with rent alone, you're not going to reach that
yeah.
rate.
So
But if you look at all,
and then you're
businesses
saying
together-
administratively this is simpler because I don't need to tally all these deductible
Exactly.
expenses and have my accountant figure it out. I just take a lower number, so it makes it simpler for everybody.
Also simple for the tax office to focus on what they have to focus on.
I kind of disagree. I have to be honest.
Well, but that's the philosophy. At least we understand the philosophy. Yes.
So I kind of disagree because I'll give you an example. So I have two other studios besides this one.
Mm-hmm.
One here, and one at in Connecticut at my home there.
Is that your home office?
Well, they're both at my homes, right? Now I don't actually run them as a deduct. I don't write them off, so it doesn't really apply. But however, if they're part of this operation, right? If I was truly assessing the operation of this business, for me to use that X small spot of square meters at each of those other locations.
Outside of St. Martin? You said Connecticut. You said Connecticut.
One is here and one is in Connecticut. But in theory,
so the first issue you have is the tax inspectorate, because now you fall into because now they have to assess this. So again, now it's going to be you paying your accountant to have a back and forth with the tax inspectorate on can this be deducted, because it's not a guarantee. It needs to be assessed.
Understood. But so take the second studio that's here, right? If I really wanted to assess the profitability of this business should be paying for a portion of that space. Now, for me, it's irrelevant to do it. But if I really wanted to do that, I should be.
But I don't think you follow, because they would say it's not a home office, because this is your main office,
right?
So you wouldn't in the current legislation you wouldn't be able to get the deductible.
Well, why couldn't there be a home office too? Like, I can have an office and
I'm
a home
just
office.
see this argument here. You'll be going back and forth with the tax inspector on this same, and that's what I'm trying to say. We're simplifying the matter because your main business would be here. I can see the arguments coming in the current legislation as it's written now. I don't see them deducting your home office because this will be your office. It's a second office.
Yeah. Whether it's a home office or a second office, it's still part of the business.
Yeah.
And the business should pay for it.
So let me ask you. Most businesses hire.
And these are the discussions we're going to have in Parliament,
Mhm.
right?
So most businesses hire an accountant or a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Have you reached out to like the Grant Thorntons or the different accounting companies just to get some feedback on your proposal?
Individual tax lawyers.
Yeah, tax advisors, accountants.
Yes. And all were super in favor.
Yes.
They were like, this is so. Now, I'll even say this. So the initial philosophy was a little less. So we had, for example, we had more deductibles left in, and the amounts were less in terms of we were not down to 15-20%. And they were like, hey, we should just go to what we can now. Why are we now going to go to a gradual step? So Aruba and Curacao are already down to 22 and 25. Why would we now try to match them when they're now focused on going even lower again? We need to be as competitive as possible in the region as soon as possible. So that's the advice from accountants, tax advisors, tax lawyers, persons in the field.
Okay.
CFOs of companies.
I also I read a article written online that I think you ultimately responded to from a former
we spoke. After those two articles came out. We also even deleted some comments. We spoke after the fact also.
It was written by
Marco
Albers, and so
his comment was for IB undernemers, so sole proprietors. So basically, what are you going to do for sole proprietors, right? Because that NVs, BVs, and all those other entities that pay profit tax, they get a benefit, but what are you now going to do for sole proprietors? And I think that has been the issue on the island, right? That every time we have a piece of legislation, it becomes, but what about this? What about that? And it's not mutually exclusive. So we could get all of them done. Let's get it done. And that was my response. We have a lot of legislation to update. I chose to go this route, and we have 14 other MPs that each, because one of the comments under the post were, hey, the one MP is working on this. Imagine if 14 MPs work on some type of legislation, how far we'll get, right? We are working on other pieces, but I'm a single MP, right? And I'm actually hoping that bringing this legislation to Parliament lights a fire on the government to understand, hey, we need tax reform as soon as possible. We need tax reform. We need to make a decision also on, for example, where we're going with TOT. If we want to keep TOT or we want to do a different tax.
I think TOT is horrible.
Okay, good.
TOT is a horrible idea. It's a cheap, easy shot,
yes,
right, to fill our coffers. The reason it's horrible, it causes immediate inflation. And we have enough of that all by ourselves.
So we have to, as a Parliament body, as a government, make a decision on where we're headed. We have zero. So as I'm also the chair of the Committee of Finance, I've sent a meeting request to the Minister of Finance asking for a meeting regarding tax reform, the tax department, and where we're headed. The response was, we're not coming to discuss this until the budget has been approved, right? So another delay, because I don't see why we can't have a discussion and while we debate the budget, because this request came in about a month ago. But we need to make a decision now. As I said earlier, decisions need speed now, right? We need to decide, like you said, do we want to continue with TOT? If not, what are we going to substitute this with? If it's going to be VAT, if it's going to be duties, what are we, because it needs to be substituted if we don't want this anymore. But we need decisions.
Can I ask? So I think ultimately St. Martin's going to need to answer a question, how to make compliance easier, because compliance is a real problem. And should St. Martin just bite the bullet and just go to some sort of a import duty, eliminate all these other taxes, and just go to a much simpler import duty. I think there's a sort of a fundamental question on much
Mm-hmm.
broader strokes
So
where the country
it
should
would either
go.
have to be import duties, a value added tax, or sales tax. I think.
Right. So
It has to be
it
one.
seems
It
to
has to be one
me
of those three.
that Parliament should have that discussion and
Yes.
say, we need an overhaul because compliance is very low at the
Mhm.
moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just work towards a broad stroke. What's the direction that the
I
country's
agree.
going to go
I agree.
into? Because then maybe all of these things should all go away. Profit tax should just go away and just go to an import duty.
I'm not too sure it could go away.
But look at St. Bart's. Look at Anguilla, right? There's no wage tax. There's just import duty.
There's GST.
Yeah, but it's easy to administrate. It comes into the port. You charge a percentage, and
Dr. Santos doesn't like GST.
I don't. First of all, I don't like any notion of import duty, and I.
But a
think
discussion must happen.
but at least say
agree.
let's have
Yeah.
the debate,
Yeah.
and then say no. For these reasons, that's not the direction we're going to go, so that we can get that broader stroke.
we
But I think import duties, but you'll see less inflation in TOT. I guarantee you that.
what we
Guarantee you.
what we need to do is come to a way that we are providing superior service
Mhm.
to our residents with the lowest tax burden on businesses as individuals, and I just don't see us getting there. All I keep seeing is let's talk about this. Let's add. This
No,
is
but
the
no,
first.
no.
I'll give you credit,
Mm.
Ardwell. MP. I'll give you credit because this is the first proposal I've ever seen come across my desk since I've been here in the last 20 years where I've seen the rates go down. So for so for that, my hat is off to you. But to me, the real issue here was the amount of money, the amount of people that we have that come through this island year after year, day after day.
But then then the discussion Amy brought up is the one we need to have because those are indirect taxes. Right. So we need to have
and compliance. We have to talk about that.
That's my point. That we are afraid to actually enforce the tax laws that we have. We only listen. How many times have you gotten an assessment for the tax office that's just clearly been made up with a fictitious number from nowhere?
But we also have to simplify it because if we enforcing tax laws that we have now, small business can't survive.
No, I agree with you. That the whole tax structure is garbage.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's a horrible.
And
model.
that's what I said. We need fit for purpose because we've adopted a tax structure from the Netherlands from 19 whatever or 18 whatever, and we've never amended it to fit our local realities.
And real quick, I know we need to go. When I was reading this NRPB report, right, in their background for the island, right, they're talking about a population size of approximately 40,000 people,
45, yeah.
and 10,000 undocumented, right? So it means you have a country
Very
where
informal.
more than 20% is not even properly registered,
yeah.
right? So imagine what percentage of your economy is in that gray area.
And that's why, like you said, if you go over to one of these other taxes, they all contribute.
Exactly.
So
So
revenue increases significantly then.
just our parting word, our suggestion to you as a member of parliament is have that broader discussion about not even a specific legislation. I mean, and again, I agree with SOC. I think the initiative to bring down taxes with the idea of improving, making it simpler and hopefully generating more revenue from a broader base instead of just a few people, right? That makes total sense. But the broader discussion about what does St. Maarten look like 10 years from now in terms of a tax environment?
So the meeting has been called. I'll even send you the meeting request. So we can do from two angles. At the press brief and say, hey, when are you going to call this? Go to attend this meeting because I agree, and that's what we called the meeting for. It wasn't a meeting to attack. It was a meeting to be called. But I called then. Let's have the discussion.
Every election, everyone talks about tax reform.
Yeah.
That means take the current system,
And change.
burn the whole legislation, and start from scratch. Let's whiteboard this.
Or maybe just amend because I don't think everything is wrong.
But again, those fundamental discussions.
Yes.
Yeah.
MP Hardwell Arian, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Promise me you'll come back.
For sure, because like I said, I have another piece of legislation that we could debate here again in the next 2 weeks,
Sure.
hopefully.
We'll look forward to it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Emily, Thank you for joining us this morning. St. Martin Sites News that matters to you. I'm way late. It's 5 minutes after the hour of 9 o'clock. Marine and tropical weather update is coming next.